Okay. Welcome to Garden of the Spirit, the quest studying apples from the orchard for the second time. Beginning after Pesach 2014, this class meets in Long Meadow, Massachusetts, the center of the universe, and is held in memory of Malka Ruth Bas Moshe, Margaret Vogel of blessed memory. Apples from the Orchard contain selections of teachings of Kabbalah from the Arizal, Rabbi Yitzhak Luria, based on the weekly Torah portion, superbly translated and explained by Rabbi Moshe Wisniewski. We're on page 1195. So this is what was added in the newest reprint of the book. However, it's not chapter 2, it's a continuation of chapter 1. And as we learned in the first part of this chapter, in the main body of the book, that it talked about the spheres that Yosef and his brothers corresponded to. Yosef corresponded to the masculine sphere, to Yesod. The brothers corresponded to Nukva. Therefore, apparently they were envious of him. And now we're going to continue along the different levels in the story of Yosef, which is in the Parsha of Mikeitz. I do not have the notes, by the way. So, non-stop day. So we're gonna read inside, and we'll wing it as we go along. Thank you. Are you ready? Page 1195.
I'm ready. Okay. Anatomy of the Divine Presence. The following is the continuation of the passage found on page 231 to 236, which should be reviewed before proceeding. It was previously noted that when Yosef's brothers cast him into the pit, this was because they were jealous of him because he embodied the male principle, Yesod of Zeranpin, while they embodied various aspects of the female principle, Nukva. By throwing him into the pit, they caused him to descend to the level of Gevurah of Nukva. When they later sold him and his purchasers brought him to Mitzrayim, this caused him to descend further to the backside of Nukva. That is a realm exposed to the influence of evil. The Arizal now goes on to describe the mystical dimensions of Yosef's further tribulations.
Thank you. I got another one here too. So so we're going to continue describing along these lines of which spheres everything corresponds to. Now, we have learned about the front of the sphere and the back of the sphere. The back, if I'm not mistaken, generally refers to the counterpart of the sphere in Klipa. So that very often we call it Bechinas. The word for back is Bechinas Acharayim, that it's the back. And the description of that is that if you want to give something, you have a gift to give someone, to a friend, so you invite them over, you go to them, you spend half an hour or an hour, and you talk, you have a good time, and then you say, okay, here, I have a gift for you, and you're able to present it. If you have something to give someone that you don't care for, someone that you don't like, someone who rubs you the wrong way, someone who gives you the creeps. Okay, so you're not going to spend what? The question is, why would you give them something? Because you have to. Someone gave it to you and said, please give it to them. or you're cleaning out your basement and you found it and it belongs to them. So, or they bought it from you on Instagram. So you're not going to spend an hour with them. You're not going to spend half an hour. You're going to ring the bell and leave it by the door and walk away. Or something like that. You're going to go over, hi, here, goodbye. So the figurative way to describe that is you give it to them behind your back. You give it to them all over your shoulder. Here it is. I don't need to see you. I don't want to see you. You just give it to them over your back, and that's all. So klipa exists. And why would you want to give it to them? Hashem has to give klipa to survive. He has to give it its life force. Okay? But he does it grudgingly. And so therefore it's called a harayim and is referred to as the back. So over here, when we talk about the back of this sphere, the back of that level, most likely it's talking about Shechina. I'm sorry, talking about klipa. It's not talking about a front or direct line to the divine energy, but it's talking about something that's received indirectly. And again, grudgingly might be the best word. So that is the back. We know that the Potiphar, who was the Sarhata, but it says Three's power, an officer of Paro. Here they translated it a little different. One, usually Threes is an officer. It could also be a eunuch. Here they translated it as eunuch. I'm not sure where he chooses this one. This is translation. And Potiphar is the one, and he's also called Sarhat Abachim. He's the minister of meat. In my understanding, I think I said this 6 years ago. My understanding, to be the minister of meat for Paro means that you are the minister, you run the ministry of meat. So you might give out licenses to butcher shops. You you run the inspections to make sure that it meets the health requirements. It means that you supply Paro and his army and so on and so forth with all the meat. Okay, you run the meat department. One of my kids a few years ago, Hanukkah, was the community, Jewish community in Marrakech, Morocco, asked for some yeshiva boys. So my son was chosen to go. The yeshiva decided not to send out anymore, but they made an exception for this. There's about 125 Jews left in Marrakech. It used to be a very prominent Jewish community. My son said, one of the people in the community, he has the contract to supply the government with all their tires for their cars. Okay, now you know why he doesn't leave, why he's still there. So he's supplying them with all their tires. That means all the government cars and probably all the and the army as well. So this is the ministry of meat. It's probably a very good position to be in. And then we read in the story that that the Paro needs that there's they have a special dinner once a year at his birthday. So the minister is the one who handles the meat. Minister of baking brings the baking, but it could be he wasn't a baker. It could be he was the guy who sat in the air conditioned office and then ran all the baking contracts, all the bakery contracts. Okay, so here we're going to have the. Okay, so go ahead, Alan and Potiphar. I'm sorry, one more thing. That Ima, yeah. So till now we talk about Malchus as a feminine principle. Remember, Bina is also a feminine principle, just the feminine principle of the intellect.
And Potiphar, Pharaoh's eunuch, fought him. This alludes to the Shekhinah, divine presence in Bina, inasmuch as the numerical value of Potiphar is the same as that of Shekhinah. Thus, Yosef ascended to the level of the supernal Shekhinah. Potiphar, which is Pevav Tes Yud Pe Resh, 80 plus 6 plus 9 plus 10 plus 80 plus 200 is 385. Shekhinah, Shin Chaf Yud Dun Hey, 300 plus 20 plus 10 plus 50 plus 5, also 385. Bina, Ima, and the Malchus, Nukva, are the two feminine partsufim relative to the two masculine partsufim of Abba and Zeranpin. Generally, the divine presence, Shekhinah, is associated with Nukva, but because Ima is also feminine, it can be considered a higher form of the Shekhinah. In the present context, since all of Mitzrayim was previously identified as the backside of Nukva, Potiphar embodied the backside of Bina of Nukva. When he bought Yosef, he elevated him to that level. As we have seen previously, it is possible for manifestly evil personalities to represent, allude to, or even embody sublime levels of divinity. By failing to live up to the divine revelation they represent, they manifest a fallen, evil version of that divinity latent within them. This was true of Potiphar and of Pharaoh, as will be seen presently.
Okay, I'm sorry. So, where was Yosef? Potiphar was the Shekhinah of Bina. In, I guess,
Bina of Nukba.
Bina of Nukva, right?
I guess in Klippa, not in holiness. So Potiphar is in Bina, and where is, and Yosef now, it says,
He was in Gevurah.
goes up to this level because Potiphar bought him. So Yosef, obviously, he's the side of holiness, but he rose up to this level. Okay, so go ahead, 1196 to the next thing.
Therefore, when Potiphar's wife said to Yosef, "Lie with me," he answered her, saying, "This is not my place," recognizing that by dint of his own worth, such an act was inappropriate for him. He was spiritually situated at the said location, that is Bina of Malchus.
Okay, so what was not his place? He rose up, and therefore she was beneath him. Her level was beneath his level, and it wouldn't have been appropriate. That's not clear.
Well, he was raised up, but he doesn't necessarily mean
Okay,
that
if anyone
he
has
has.
an idea, I'd like to hear it.
It doesn't necessarily mean that he has to be evil.
At his previous level, maybe at his previous level, which was Yesod. So for Yesod would be the right place. But now that because Yesod and Nukva, but now that he rose up to Bina, so for Bina, it doesn't, Bina is a feminine component and she's a feminine component. That doesn't, well, in the right, officially it doesn't work.
It doesn't mean he's going to be in the evil.
Jim, we can't hear you.
I don't know why. Hold on a second.
Oh, my sound is
I
off.
can hear Jim.
All right.
My sound's been off the whole time. I'm sorry.
Okay. It doesn't mean he's going to be in the evil realm. He was raised up to the level of Bina in a supernal realm. Potiphar himself was evil, but Joseph wasn't evil. So Joseph ended up in a holier place. And yes, and Potiphar's wife is not in the same place as he is. So he was raised up at that point. Um, but
But in his old place, he was a male component. But now he's in Bina. So he says, Bina doesn't mate with Nukva.
right, it's not but it wouldn't have made it anyway because he's in a holier place. It's you have to look at it. I'm looking at it not as physically, but more in they don't match.
But what it says is that if he wouldn't have been elevated here,
Yeah,
it seems like it says it would have been an appropriate,
I don't
appropriate
I don't know. I don't
just
know.
because he
The
was
idea that
elevated.
he's
Now it's not appropriate.
The idea that he's a servant, he's just some prisoner, whatever.
Kabbalistically,
She can do what she wants. And I'm just saying that if the elevation by being brought on by Potiphar to work for him elevated Yosef on both levels, Kabbalistically and, society,
Physically,
normal level. So I guess that doesn't address the gender thing. But you can see that because he became Potiphar's viceroy, because he did, or servant, because not viceroy, but because Potiphar saved him, why would he do that? So that's maybe an echo of the elevation. But it doesn't address the gender issue.
doesn't address the gender. No, I wasn't
I
coming
think
from
that
the
here he was brought. I think that's what it means. That beforehand he was like in Yesod, but here he was elevated to Bina, which might be the place to point out that there was an event in Long Meadow today on the green for the for the LGBTQs. So the organizer is the young man who set up our YouTube channel that we're able to broadcast. He's put on film for me, so it's his event.
Let him get his legal rights as a citizen. That's
He's a
all.
nice boy, a very
what we're
nice boy.
talking about, right? Yeah.
Okay.
So when he went into the pit, though, he went to the level of Gevura of Nukva, so that's feminine.
Yes. So we had that last week. So we're going to read that now. I think that there was Gevura involved. Okay, go ahead.
They thereupon put him back into the pit, which corresponds to Gevura of Bina.
Okay, so it sounds like he's bouncing around here. And last week, what did we say is the gematria of Bor? Bor is 208, which is the same as Yitzchak. Yitzchak is 208. Okay. Oh no, wait, where are we? In the wrong place. Okay, no matter. So then we're going to have again what I spoke about before of the front and the back. Usually when we talk about the back is klipa, and the front means a direct line of divine energy. Now, before we talked, just on the page before, we had Potiphar. Potiphar is 385, same as Shechina. But now Yosef is standing in front of Paro. Paro, the word Paro means to uncover. Like you reveal, you take away any mystery. It's not a positive idea. But the letters of Paro can be scrambled to say ha'oref, which means the neck. And by neck, we mean the back of the neck. The front is the throat, and this is the back of the neck. And I guess could be some connected with that, some stubbornness. Stiff neck. Okay. Jim, would you like to continue? He stayed.
He stayed at that level until he ascended out of the pit and stood before Pharaoh. Pharaoh embodied Bina of Nukva itself. from which are enfolded all secrets and lights, because Pharaoh embodied the neck of Bina, of Nukva, whereas Joseph was situated in the throat of Bina, of Nukva, at the straits on the front side of Bina, of Nukva, of Zeranpin. This is why he is specifically described as standing before Pharaoh, for he was in front. That's on the throat, while Pharaoh was on the neck. As stated in the Zohar, the word Pharaoh means uncovering or unfurling, meaning that he represents an intense revelation of divinity. Also, as we have seen, the word for Pharaoh permeates to the word for neck, indicating that Pharaoh is identified with spirituality associated with the neck. In general, the neck is seen as constricted passageway from the head to the torso, from the intellect to the emotions. Pharaoh is king of Egypt, Mitzrayim. The straits of the 50 gates of Bina is the opposition to the successful passage of intellect into the emotions, preventing the birth of a new emotional connection to God. The neck is situated behind the throat. The front side of any partziv is its better side relative to its back, for it reflects its true nature and ability to function. The very word for face in Hebrew is related to the word for inner dimension, indicating the front discloses the inner essence of the entity, as opposed to the back, whose main functions are protection and excretion. Thus, Joseph, who was situated in the throat of Bina of Nukva, in its front, was at that point superior to Pharaoh, who was situated in the back, in the neck of Bina on its back. And that's what I was saying before. Joseph was in the front. He was from the spirit. He was on the holy end of it, while everybody else in Egypt was on the back end of it.
Let's clip up.
Potiphar's wife, Pharaoh, they all were. But he was on the holy end of it, on the positive. He was on the front end of Bina, and he is to Pharaoh. He is to Potiphar's wife. He's to everyone.
Or he is on the side of holiness,
Right.
while they are in the side of klipa.
Yes. Yes.
Same.
Yes. That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
Yeah.
All except. Correct. Good point. Except not Potiphar's daughter. who
No,
ended up
not
marrying
Potiphar's
Yosef.
daughter, but because Potiphar's daughter. Don't forget, Potiphar was on the level of Shekhinah on the backside. Doesn't mean you can't get to a positive level from the back. People can change.
Yes.
His daughter.
Pardon?
Potiphar's daughter was supposedly Dinah's daughter.
Yes, she was really not Potiphar's
She was not his daughter.
She wasn't in flesh, his daughter.
Right. That's why she could be the same level as Joseph and be allowed to
Right.
couple with him to produce the Fry Menashe, because they were at the same level to begin with, or wound up being at that level.
They were in the front.
Yeah, they're in the front.
Yep.
Okay, very good. Thanks. So now that Yosef is at Bina, the neck of Bina, we had before that one of the terms for Bina is when the Torah says Rechovot HaNahar, the widening, the broad river. And that was one of the 8 kings of Edom, of Esav, was Shaul from the wide river. The wide river refers to Bina, because that's where the concept expands. So that's a nickname. And so, but it does say regarding Yosef specifically that Paro rode him, made him ride, or drove him in a chariot 2. Like you have Air Force 1 and Air Force 2. So they had chariot 1 and chariot 2. The Torah refers to Mirkevet HaMishnah, the wagon. I always hate the word chariot. You think of the Roman legions. Who knows? The royal carriage, royal wagon, that was reserved for the second in command. So that's that second royal chariot or second royal vehicle refers to Bina. Go ahead, Jim.
Okay, so Pharaoh then had him ride in his second royal chariot, referring to the Yesod of Bina of Nukva, otherwise known as the widening of the river. Bina in general is referred to as widening of the river, referring to how Bina elaborates and develops seminal drop of insight posited in it by Chachma. By putting Joseph in second command chariot, Pharaoh was empowering Joseph to spread his influence through Egypt. In this way, Bina of Nukva, as embodied by Pharaoh, was channeled through its own Yesod, thereby inseminating all Egypt with whatever divine consciousness Joseph could transmit to it.
Yosef did have a big influence in Egypt. In one of my first years in school teaching, there's a popular singer who I guess did a performance. It was covered in the news, and for the performance she wore a headband. And so after that, the girls in school came to school all wearing headbands. And obviously it wasn't just them, it was all around the country. And when popular people or royals named their child Archibald, so then then people copy and they named their kids Archibald. Do you remember Nate Archibald? Anyone?
Basketball player.
Basketball player. Archibald Leach, not in my.
Archibald Cox.
Archie Cox.
Who was that?
Archibald Leach.
Archibald
Cox.
Cox was Attorney General.
Yes.
Archibald Leach was, which actor was that? Cary Grant, I think.
Cary Grant. Cary Grant.
Cary Grant was Archibald Leach.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. You didn't know that?
No, no clue. No, I just. So. Right. So in any case, these things become very popular. So there's no question that Yosef was extremely popular in Egypt. The Torah gives us just a hint of the influence that he had, and he was. There's no question that he had a big influence on Egypt, and many people were, followed him and looked up to him, and copied what he did in a good way, in a very, very positive way. Yes, so he was a hero. He was a national hero. Even before that, there's a medrash that he led the army and won some wars. He concluded some wars that had been lingering on. So there's a whole bunch of things going on. The Torah says that at the parades, the Torah implies that at the parades, the girls and women climbed up the walls to get a good view of his famed beauty.
And they say they threw their jewelry.
How much influence he had in the other ways. When he was in Potiphar's household, he wound up running it. When he was in prison, he was
running it.
running the prison a lot of ways, for in charge of, even as a prisoner, he was still running the prison because they looked at his guidance in doing that. So wherever he was, he rose to levels of authority that people respected him.
Yes. So like I said, this happens today. True. It's not funny. It's not just except for his brothers, but when he was in an environment where he was the dear child, he was valued, and he had everything going for him, and he couldn't get along. And now that he's in the environment, which is seeks to drag him down and restrict him and so on, suddenly here he's shining. Definitely. So in any case, here it says, so what is this influence? This influence is his bina is through his yesod, that he reached bina of nukva, but he is the yesod, and he's and that role, he's having a big influence on Egypt.
Because he is holy. He's
what?
He comes from the front. Let me put it that way. Because he's so much from the front, because he represents holiness, he can bring the divine energy from Chachma and Bina all the way through the throat into Yesod, which he is, into Malchus, and into the world, which is what he does. And that's why he's the image of that person who maintained himself in a holy way in a foreign exiled land, but continued to bring a benevolent energy through himself at all times, through his life.
Yes, and he says here, he inseminated all of Egypt.
Yes.
With divine consciousness.
Yes.
In his role as Yesod.
Yes.
Okay. Yep. So he's Bina. This is Merkeves HaMishnah.
I know, I'm in
royal
Heinz class.
Do you need a lube and esrog?
Oh, yes.
What kind do you
Second
want?
royal wagon. This
That's
is
good.
Bina. Page 1197. Now also Paro said to him, after now
Thank
that
you.
Hashem has informed you of all this, Ein navon v'chacham kamocha. There is none as wise and smart as you. Again, the word navon, this is bina. Okay, 1197. Gershon, similarly.
Similarly, Pharaoh said to Joseph, there is none as understanding and wise as you. By saying this, Pharaoh was acknowledging that Joseph, the personification of Yesod, the true transmitter of all the content of the intellect, Bina, understanding, and Chochma, wise, into reality.
So, and now he is, there is there's a fault line or problem with Chochma and Bina, and that is it has to pass through the neck, the constriction of the neck. But it compares this with Yesod, with the covenant. And Yesod, the male organ, which apparently is not much obstruction. Go ahead, Gershon.
The organ of the covenant is situated between the thighs, wide and not constricted. Here, Yesod is contrasted with the neck. Yesod is able to accomplish the transference of the content of all Sephiros above into the lower reality without obstruction. The neck, in contrast, represents obstruction itself.
Oh, and then, I guess, now that he was put in this, he was that Paro gave him this, put him in this role. Now he is Yesod. What's the word? Bona fide. He is the par excellence. I gotta brush up on my French. He is Yesod. He is the epitome of Yesod. He is the classic Yesod. Okay, go ahead. Next section.
He thus returned to Yesod of Zerampin, which was his true place. Pharaoh's appointment of Joseph as viceroy of Egypt heralded his restitution to his correct role vis-a-vis the spiritual reality he embodied. The result now contrasts Joseph's spiritual identity with Benjamin's.
Okay, so now we're going to go back to Benjamin, and so again we're going to go back to Benjamin. We talked about the male, which is Ze'er Anpin, and then the female, which is Nukva. They relate to each other through interaction, which causes the world to exist, and to exist in an optimal manner. In that optimal manner, so there has to be a healthy interaction and an interest in each other. And we call this interest or arousal is known as either male waters or feminine waters. So let's go ahead to see what is Binyamin's role here, and also in relationship to Yosef. Go ahead, Gershon.
Returning to Benjamin, he embodied, as stated, the Yesod of the Nukba of Zerampin and aroused her feminine waters. Benjamin was Joseph's only full brother, as opposed to the other sons of Jacob, who were his half-brothers. This relationship is reflected the fact that something is not grammatically correct. In Kabbalah, Joseph is termed the higher saint, Zadik Elion, and Benjamin the lower saint, Zadik Tachton. They both personify Yesod, the sephira of sexual fidelity, and are thus quintessentially righteous. But Joseph personifies rectified male sexuality, while Benjamin personifies rectified female sexuality. Even though Benjamin was, of course, male himself, he was female insofar as he acknowledged his role vis-a-vis Joseph to be that of a receiver, and like Joseph's other brothers, he was not jealous of Joseph's role as a giver.
Each of them had a role as tzaddik, as someone who's righteous. Yosef is known as a righteous person because he achieved something that they felt that his father and the brothers felt was impossible. The Torah says that all the family came down to Egypt. Yosef was already in Egypt. What is this? And now we know Yosef's in Egypt. What's this extra idea that Torah tells us that Yosef was already in Egypt? To tell you that Yosef didn't change. Even though he lived among the Egyptians, and the influence there was very strong, very powerful, the negative influence, but Yosef managed not to be influenced at all by the Egyptian, the corrupt and malevolent. It sounds nice. It's
Malevolent.
nice.
That's good.
Egyptian Egyptian culture. The brothers, as far as they were concerned, this wasn't possible. That's why when the brothers moved down, so Yosef settled them out of the city in a rural area where they wouldn't be able to be influenced by Egyptian culture. His father felt it was impossible, but Yosef showed them that he had maintained his righteousness, and this made a huge impression on all of them. So because of this, he's called Yosef HaTzadik, Yosef the righteous. The Binyamin is also called Binyamin HaTzadik, Binyamin the righteous. The Mishnah teaches that there are four people in the world, in history, who had absolutely not only no sin of their own. There are many people who don't have any sin, but they have some kind of fault. So where the mitzvah, instead of doing the mitzvah 100%, they only did it 99%. Okay, that's considered a fault, even though they never violated any of the commandments. There were 4 people who had absolutely no fault, and one of them was Binyamin. There was a son of David. David's father, Yishai, a son of David, and I'm supposed to, huh? Nope. And we had this before, maybe a year ago. I don't remember. So one of them is Binyamin. So therefore they're both known by the term tzaddik, righteous. Okay, one moment. Yes, Joseph was tzaddik because he lived among the Egyptians and wasn't influenced by them. So each one earned the title tzaddik for a different reason. So next, what it says is that as we said last week, that when Yosef went missing, Yosef was the male component of Ze'er Anpin, Yesod. When he went missing, then Binyamin stepped up to the plate to take the place of Yosef. And he stood in as the Yesod of Ze'er Anpin. Gershon, go ahead. But when?
But when he saw that Jacob was mourning for Joseph, who embodied Yesod of Ze'er Anpin, and knew that no coupling can occur without the organ of the covenant, embodied by Joseph, who was missing, as it is written, the righteous one is missing, Binyamin went and took Joseph's place, ascending to the level of the male and situating himself at the Yesod of Ze'er Anpin and functioning in place of his brother Joseph. This is why he named all his sons after his brother.
Which is what we said last week.
Yep. Thus, when Joseph...
I'm going to ask, thank you. And then it goes through the 10 children. And this is in the Medrash, and it's quoted by Rashi. Avigail, page 1198. Thus
when Yosef knew, make sure you can hear me. Thus when Yosef knew that Benjamin was standing before him, he asked Benjamin, "Do you have a wife? Do you have children?" And he replied, "Yes, I have a wife. I have children." Joseph then asked him, "What names did you give them?" And he replied, "Such and such after my brother." Benjamin's sons' names were Bela, Becher, Ashbeel, Giera, Naaman, Ike, Achi, Rosh, Mupim, Hupim, and Ard. And Rashi explains, when Joseph asked Benjamin what these names signify, he answered, "They all refer to my lost brother and the troubles he underwent." Bela refers to how he was swallowed up, Nivla, and disappeared among the Gentiles. Becher refers to the fact that he was the firstborn, Bechor, of our mother. Ashbeel refers to how God sent him into captivity. Sheva Oel, Gera refers to how he was a sojourner, a ger, among the Gentiles. Naaman refers to how he was of pleasant nature, Naim. Akai refers to the fact that he was my brother, Aki. And Rosh refers to how, as my elder brother, he was my superior, Rosh head. Mupim refers to how he learned from the mouth of Mipi, my father. Hupim refers to how neither of us was present at the other's marriages to see each other under the wedding canopy, chuppah. Ard refers to how he descended, Yar Ard, to live among the Gentiles.
Yeah, so each of the 10 names of the
Ard.
sons referred to something with Yosef and what had befallen Yosef. So, but here, that is the Midrashic meaning. But here we're going to look at it Kabbalistically, that Yosef said to him, and this is in the Midrash, do you have brothers and a wife? Meaning, are you the Yesod? Do you personify the male principle? This is what we had last week. Go ahead in mystical terms.
In mystical terms, this means that Yosef asked him, do you have brothers and a wife above at my level? For if you have a wife, you must be personifying the male principle. He then asked him if he emanated any offspring, and in which world he emanated, above, in Atzilus, Yosef's level, or below, in Berea, the brother's level.
Okay, and now it's going to go how Binyamin answers him. And again, we're talking about the spheres of Kabbalah. So this is a whole nother perspective or level of their discussion and conversation. Okay, go ahead, Abigail.
Benjamin answered him on both accounts. Regarding his wife, he said, I have one, and I am embodying the male principle, and in fact, the yesod of the male principle, not the yesod of the female principle, as I did before. For I ascended into the male principle. As to your question about what I emanated, if it was above in Atzilus or below in Berea, know that it was emanated from above, for I functioned in place of my brother and therefore named my sons after him, because I took his place in imitation of the law of Levirate marriage. I therefore named my sons after my brother, as it is written, the son that is born will stand in the place of his dead brother. Benjamin said this because he thought that his brother Yosef had died. And since Yosef, according to what he knew, had died childless, he performed something akin to the rite of a Levirate marriage in order to produce offspring in his place, naming his sons after his dead brother, similar to the custom of Levirate marriage. Levirate marriage, yibum, as is the Torah's enactment that if a married man dies childless, one of his brothers should ideally marry the dead man's widow. If for whatever reason this is not possible or advisable, the Torah allows the widow to release her brother-in-law from this obligation via a specific ceremony, halitza. When the widow's brother-in-law does marry her, he inherits his brother's estate, which remains in the dead brother's name. The brother only manages it for him. Nonetheless, the institution of Levirate marriage is phrased in the Torah as if it is intended to perpetuate the deceased brother by considering the first male child of the widow and her brother-in-law to somehow be the deceased man's. In any case, Benjamin was under no obligation to perform the duty of Levirate marriage vis-a-vis Yosef, since Joseph was not married when he died, i.e. disappeared from Jacob's family. Nonetheless, in accordance with the Torah's phraseology, and perhaps in seeking to fulfill the inner intention behind this institution, namely that brothers should feel fraternal responsibility for completing each other's lives if one of them is somehow prevented from doing so himself, Benjamin sought to replace Yosef spiritually and produce offspring with his own wife in his stead. He expressed this desire by giving his children names that reflect Yosef and his life.
Okay, so not in the literal sense of levirate marriage and standing in place of, but standing in place of the dead brother spiritually.
And this is when Yosef cried, right?
Yes.
This when? Yeah, no, I see so much more.
Okay, good.
That made me cry.
So now, actually, Binyamin is very close. This is we scramble the letters with as the word for levirate or levirate marriage. Levirate marriage is yibum, yud beis vav mem, and Binyamin has a Beis, has a Yud, a Mem,
Amen.
no Vav, but we throw a Nun in there. We throw one Nun in the Binyamin. Yeah. Okay, go ahead, Abigail. Let's do one more.
Thus you see that the word Binyamin is spelled with the same letters as the word let us fulfill the duty of a brother-in-law, plus a final nun, which alludes to the channel of Yesod. Benjamin, Beis Nun, Mem, Nun. Let us fulfill Beis, let us fulfill the duty of a brother-in-law.
Is the word Niyabim.
Yeah. Nun Vav Beis, Nun Vav Mem, right? Sad. The final Nun, a straight line, depicts the flow of divine beneficence through Yesod into lower reality.
Okay.
Now, if
we're gonna stop here.
Okay.
Okay, so bottom line, there's a lot of Sphira stuff going around.
Yeah.
And Binyamin, Yosef went up to Bina. He was Shechina and Bina, both from Potiphar and then from Paro, put him into Bina, and he was elevated. And as such, he had a great, profound influence on Egypt. And his son Binyamin, his brother Binyamin, stepped up to the plate to take the place of Yosef, who had gone missing, and he wanted to fill in that role of the Yesod, of the male component. All right.
All right.
Let me get off the live stream.